Welcome to the Become Who You Are podcast, a production of the John Paul II Renewal Center. I'm Jack Riggert, your host. Thanks for joining us. I'm with Tom Hampson, who's co-hosted with me today, and we're grateful to be with Monica Cline, founder of It Takes a Family. Monica, good to see you. Welcome.
Oh, it's good to see both of you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you're doing such important work, and Tom and I talk about this. We've never heard anybody explain the nefarious nature of the National Sex Ed Standards, also called the Comprehensive Sex Ed Standards, better than you. Part of that has to be your background, your conversion story. I'll just mention this, and then hopefully you'll reiterate a little bit. But you're a former comprehensive sex educator yourself, Title X family planning training manager, trained by the LGBT community and Planned Parenthood, and that lasted over a decade. And then you had a conversion experience prompted you to deeply question these comprehensive sex education, the crisis pregnancy counseling that you were doing. Do you mind sharing that story? It's a powerful story, Monica, and we'll go back a little bit in your history.
Sure. Well, I'm going to age myself a little bit here because I began that career back in the late 1990s. So I was coming right out of college from UT Austin, and I was like most young people, I wanted to impact the world for some, and I wanted to do something positive, and I wanted to work with populations that were considered marginalized. So I really wanted to do valuable work and help my community. And at that time, the HIV epidemic was, really fresh on everyone's minds. HIV had hit in the late 70s, 80s. So by the 90s, sex education was really being funded because of HIV, wanting to do HIV prevention. And so that's what got me into it. Is I had a relative who had died in the 80s because of contracting HIV. There were no treatments. And so he quickly
And I'll just add,
died.
Monica, I had a brother that died. Same thing. He died in the 90s, but still, the treatments were just starting to come online, and they were just experiments, weren't they?
They were. And I think my uncle got that in the 80s before there were any treatments. And so it was a very quick, it affected him very quickly. He also was part of the LGBTQ community, and he did not live in our state, so I didn't get to know him very well. And so, of course, when I didn't have I was taught that there was a God. There's only one God, but I never went to church. So I really didn't know who God was. I wouldn't even call myself a Christian at that time. So my point in saying that is I decided that I wanted to learn more about my uncle's culture, the gay culture. And I wanted to help people who identified with that culture, with being gay, bisexual, or transgender. And I wanted to help them from getting the HIV virus. And so I started volunteering for a gay organization that had HIV prevention money funded by the government. And they had two programs: men who have sex with men and women of color of childbearing age. And so I started volunteering. And by the time I graduated, which was probably a year later, they hired me. And I was working on the women's team, of course, reaching out to African American and Hispanic women in particular parts of Austin, Texas, that were being greatly hit by the HIV virus. And so that's really how I got into it. I wasn't doing this for an ideology. I wasn't doing it for a particular doctrine. I really was, I came at this with compassion, with a heart for wanting to prevent the spread of this disease. But what I didn't realize is working for a gay organization, or really working in the field of sex education, prevention, which is risk reduction as a public health model, was going to teach me a completely new doctrine that I wasn't aware of. And that is the doctrine that anything goes. You can do anything you want. But if you want to be quote unquote responsible, then you should use, condoms, lubrication, and get tested, and tell your sexual partners if you have a disease. And so that was the world I was brought into. And of course, working for a gay organization, they really wanted me to understand the gay culture. And so I was deeply immersed in the gay culture for many years. whether it was attending social events to fundraisers and working with an all gay staff as well. So it really changed, not having a solid background in the Lord. I quickly took in this new doctrine and began to accept that this was perfectly normal. Within few months of working there, after being trained to work with adults, I was told that it was time for me to learn how to share this same message with children. And that's when they sent me to Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood, our office was on East 5th Street in Austin, Texas, and Planned Parenthood was on East 6th Street. And they were literally across the street. Like I just had to walk down the alley and I was in the clinic. And the director of sex education for the greater Austin, Texas was housed there. And she became my mentor on how to teach sex education prevention to children. Now, I didn't realize that children were sexually active. That wasn't something I was familiar with my own upbringing. So that shocked me. So at the time, it wasn't that I wanted to sexualize children. It was more that Planned Parenthood had presented the case to me that there were children who had diseases, there were children who were getting pregnant, they were at great risk, and that the only way we could help them was to teach them how to do it responsibly. And my response was, how do we teach these kids to avoid sexual activity? They quickly corrected me. And she patted me on the knee and she said, no, dear, we're not teaching them not to have sex. We're teaching them how to do it safer. And if you tell children not to have sex, that means you are judging them and you're going to make them feel ashamed and they'll never come back to the clinic. And then they're going to have all these problems. And so she just kind of set it up that, I couldn't be a judgmental person and that these children were consenting to having sex, and that I needed to help them in their decision. And so again, not knowing another doctrine or truth, really not knowing absolute truth, I submitted to her teaching and her ideology because my heart was, I want to help these kids. I just want to help people not get a disease. I want to help people, prevent from having this happening in their lives. And so that's how it all started.
It's you can really see that's so helpful to people, I think, because you know what happens, Monica, is people say, well, how do people not see what's happening to children when you groom them, right? When you expose
Mhm.
them to sex, even in their innocence.
Mhm.
And it's, they use the words kindness and compassion and all those things. And you can see it's a real mindset, isn't it? It's not, and I think it's important for us to discuss because when we're talking to people, sometimes you just go, I can't see how they think it's okay to bring this to 9 and 10 and 11-year-old children. But like you just unpacked, we think we're helping, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that if I had had a very strong Christian upbringing, I would have understood that there was a very strong alternative to what they were presenting, but I didn't. And so from a public health perspectives are going to be secular. Okay. So they're not going to consider abstinence and they don't consider abstinence. Um, and the public health message is a secular message. They see a secular problem of disease. We're talking about sex here. So we're talking about, HIV, other STDs, and pregnancies outside of marriage. And pregnancies, again, they lump them in there, but pregnancy is not a disease, but they present it that way.
Yes.
Pregnancy is a
Yes.
problem to them. And so their approach then to curb these issues is a secular solution. And that secular solution is condoms, lubrication, testing, treatment, and abortion. And so if we want to really eradicate or if we want to help in any way truly these secular problems of disease and sex outside of marriage and all of that, then we need a new solution. And it's not secular solutions don't really solve secular problems. And so, yeah, what I see differently today, though, is, I share my story and that's my perspective. And really, I will even say that the people I worked with, even those that were homosexual, And I would mostly worked with women when I was working when we did education with kids. I don't believe any of those women were trying to be sexually inappropriate with children in a personal way at all. I really think that they were just being educators. We're all being educators. What I see different today, and you can see it in the literature that they give to the children or in the videos, you can look at the amaze.org videos. They are highly sexualized. It's not really about prevention anymore. It is very much about teaching them how to be sexually active in all sorts of way. Now, how is it different from back then when they were teaching me? In all honesty, it was the same ideology. That same mentor told me, when you walk into a room full of children, I want you to imagine that they've done anything and everything when it comes to sex. And if they haven't, they will. And so it's your job as a sex educator to teach them about every sexual activity so that they're prepared on how to reduce their risk when they're engaged in that activity. So, yes, even in the 90s, they were teaching them all kinds of sexual activities. Now, today with technology, you're seeing videos, you're seeing whether it's animated or real people, or you're reading books like Scarletine, where it's like kink, it's just horrendous depravity. And it's all depraved, teaching children to be sexually active is depraved as well. But you can see that over the years, it has becoming more and more bold. And now, I mean, look what we saw at the opening ceremonies of the Olympics.
Yeah,
The
amazing.
Olympics is not necessarily, it's not it's a secular thing, but I grew up watching the Olympics and they were my heroes. I love watching those women running in track. Track was my favorite sport. It was wholesome, it was beautiful, and now even that has become incredibly depraved. And the reason I bring that up is just to show how bold they have become,
Mm,
because that opening ceremony, unfortunately, is something very familiar to me, having worked with the gay community back in the 90s.
mm,
That was not, as we went to, whether it was Halloween or a gay pride event,
mm,
we saw that kind of imagery. I saw that. I saw that they were already doing that. Make basically uh, distorting, being very, very depraved when it came to Christianity. They did that even back then. Now they're bold enough to put it right there at the Olympics and for everyone to see across the world. Um,
And I think what they do is, they're just saying there is no meaning and purpose behind these activities, and
yeah,
it's our Christian background that says, wait, there's the meaning and purpose behind the truth, the goodness, and the beauty of our human sexuality.
right.
Sometimes I think people get this idea that Christians are prudes, and you say, oh my gosh, it's the opposite. We highly value the beauty of our sexuality, the beauty of marriage and the family, and we put it on a pedestal, actually, and we raise it up, and if you want to destroy that, you take out that image of Christ and his church, the bride, right? But I know Tom wants to get in here too. And what we're seeing with children today, and I'll just jump ahead a little bit. So we also work with high school and college young people and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing the effects on there with anxiety, depression, what's going on in their hearts. It's amazing how it really is a travesty to our human dignity, to our marriages later on, when people get into these things. So when we're speaking about this, and I think people get the essence of this. It's not about a prude. It's not only about saying no. It's just saying, wait, let's pause. This is really beautiful. Our sexuality is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Relationships can be beautiful, and
Mm-hmm.
actually, this is in your heart. But by sexualizing those kids so early, we strip them of their innocence.
Yeah.
And I'll just finish this with this one thing. We ask kids, especially in high school, what did you do first? Did you hold a young girl's hand first, or did you see hardcore porn first? Which one of those? With
Mm-hmm.
and I've never had a boy this is high school, maybe, 16 and 17 years old. I never had a boy say I held a young girl's hand before I saw hardcore porn. And yeah, that expression that you just had, Monica, it'll make you cry, right? And that's what it does to them when they understand this. They look back and say, "Why didn't anybody tell me this?" Right? So it's what you're talking about. It's so beautiful and so powerful, and it shows us the reverse of this, right? When you want to take it down. Tom, do you want to mention a little bit about who was it that we were talking about? We saw a clip of, and speaking about Europe and how Europe has really taken out the morality totally on this, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
just
well,
a pleasure-based system now, isn't it?
right. That was a woman for Advocates for Youth who was,
That's right. Yeah.
they were one of the three, along with Planned Parenthood and SECUS, that developed the national sex ed standards. And she said that the purpose of sex education is to reestablish sexuality as joy-based and pleasure-based, and get rid of all the morality out of it. That it's not, it's just something that's a normal part of, that should be a normal part of a child's life, and which is quite disturbing when you're starting to teach these kids. It's interesting to me that you worked for an LGBT group, and then they sent you to Planned Parenthood to learn how to teach kids.
Mhm.
What did they want you to learn how to teach kids? This material. Well, first let me ask this. Um, Planned Parenthood is one of the three major groups that was involved in developing the national sex ed standards, and they were actually underway back in the 90s. They were starting to try to do that back then, although they didn't come out with the standards until several years ago. Um, but in addition, Planned Parenthood is one of the big producers of sex ed material. Were they back then in the 90s a producer of the sex ed materials?
They were the largest provider that I know of sex education, primarily risk reduction, and what we call comprehensive sex education today. SECUS
Right.
has actually had various forms of those standards for quite a while. The
Right.
NSES is just the final version of that, and I'm sure it'll be augmented again. Um, what's interesting is in the 90s, no one had, I started in 1996. There was not a curriculum. We were winging it. So when I was
Mhm.
trained by Planned Parenthood, they had some creative, workshop trainings, an icebreaker, small group, large group activities, you name it. The consulting world already had ways to creatively train people on various topics. So they just used that to teach sex education. So,
Well,
but
of
there
course.
wasn't a curriculum. Planned Parenthood did not have a curriculum in 1996 because she did not have one. She literally, this is why she was my mentor. She literally just taught me from just, hey, okay, here's an icebreaker, do this, do this, do this next, do this next. And we had to create everything ourselves because there were no curriculums. I would say that it was not a few years later, we started a lot of these organizations that were doing this work, HIV prevention. There was a lot of, with HIV, there was a lot of money being poured into sex education at that time. Before
Right.
that, there was some, but not as much. HIV really gave them the, kind of basically that they were able to tell the government, we need this money. So they were funded. So that's when they came out with evidence-based interventions. And so I was trained in evidence-based interventions for HIV prevention. And so they all worked together, whether it was HIV prevention, STD prevention, and family planning. And so they started working on curriculum and started to create them. And so that was all happening in the 90s, the creation of hands-on curriculum that you could actually use. And many people were getting it from the CDC. Planned Parenthood, always having enough money of their own, eventually were probably creating their own and selling it on their own. But they work closely with so many organizations. Like the last organization I worked for was Center for Health Training. They now call themselves Cardia. And all they did is train. And so they created a lot of curriculum for teaching this in prisons, teaching this to children, teaching it to, just all kinds of populations. drug users, people in rehab, juvenile detention centers. And so it's the NSES were actually created by hundreds of organizations, to be honest. You just see the 3 organizations that put their name on it. But it was a collaborative effort across the nation.
Well, one of the things that is kind of shocking discovery that I had a couple of years ago was this curriculum that came out of Toronto, the Toronto Planned Parenthood office, and it's titled Queering Sex Ed, and it's really directed at 6th to 8th graders and teaching them about different kinds of not normal sexual activity, you know, anal, oral, fisting, all these different kind of things, and it's presented in a way that's lighthearted, if any of that can be lighthearted.
Right.
They
put it in a recipe.
present,
it's like a recipe
yeah,
book.
how
It's in a recipe book. How to
yeah,
mix.
how do you do
mix
this
up.
well, you know, and it's like it's presented as though it's a like get involved in the fun of it.
Yeah.
And this is 6th to 8th graders. Well, I'm just appalled by this. Why would you be teaching 6th to 8th graders this kind of act? Don't understand where that mindset is coming from. Where is this coming from?
Well, you know, and Thomas, you know, you and I are both involved with several organizations where we all kind of talk about these things. And a lot of that started, okay, one, we know depravity has existed, sin has existed.
Right.
There's nothing new under the sun, right? So this has been around for a long time. But I believe in our country, what really spurred it was Alfred Kinsey in the 40s when he presented his fraudulent and sexually abusive predatory research, which he conducted on children, and used pedophiles to gather that information. And that was the research, as fraudulent and abusive and unethical as it is, was the stamp that started to, you know, it was what the government needed. He pushed it into the government, obviously, to change laws and to change the way the medical community viewed sexuality. The American Psychological Association. And so it really changed education. It really changed the way people viewed humanity and how people viewed children in regards to sex. And so even in the 90s, it was very much pleasure-based. It was also based on feminism. There is a lot of talk about needing to teach young girls how to do these things and even self-pleasure, because young boys are so selfish. And so the goal was to always seek that climax. Now the queer-based information was also something that was, I learned a lot about that being at the gay organization. Now, this particular gay organization never reached out to children as a gay organization. They were very, very much about the adults. They were very much into the art community, and they focused their efforts on just adults. They were not interested in working with kids. So, for example, with the program I worked with the women, the reason we were involved with talking to children is because children, according to the government and to family planning funding, is that when childbearing age could be as young as 9, any girl who's menstruating and who could potentially become pregnant. And so that's why there was this move towards working with children, and it was mostly working with the girls or teaching the girls. Now, what you're talking about in what they're teaching the youth, I learned about at the gay organization on how to teach to older, to adults. And I won't get too graphic on your podcast, but what you mentioned, and here's the truth though, I'll share just a little bit, because it is coming into the schools. And the reason I'm saying that is that we've had testimony from young adults who are asking, like, for example, in Texas, the State Board of Education, we need queer sex education in the public school. So they're trying to bring this into the schools. And there's a lot of third-party vendors that do bring this into the schools. And what does that mean, Monica? What is I'm obviously having a hard time saying it because it's just so
Yeah.
disgusting.
Mhm.
But she
Yeah.
mentioned, for example, fisting, the use of sex toys, anything that a basically two gay, a gay couple would use because they don't have the opposite sex with them. So with the adults, we often had a catalog called Good Vibrations, and that is a catalog of sex toys. And so that was a big part of sex education. So how can the use of these implements be used and use it safely? Because obviously these people are not monogamous either. So how can we do this safely? So it still was a part of how do you reduce your risk for disease?
And and
So
and
using,
and and we
mhm,
think we have to bring this down to kids, right?
yeah,
This is what's amazing to me when we're speaking to parents. Um, a big part of our audience are going to be parents, but grandparents and everybody,
yeah.
Monica, that cares about children, and cares about their innocence. You can see, and the question I'll ask you is an obvious question, but for the parents out there listening, you know, is it right to trust an organization, right, that does abortions as their business, and also now has got into puberty blockers and
Hmm.
cross-sex hormones, and I'm speaking of Planned Parenthood, of course, and in international Planned Parenthood, which is, and so you say, okay, well, they are involved in the national sex ed standards, right, and the
Right.
comprehensive sex ed standards. Then on the other side, you mentioned SECUS earlier,
Hmm.
sex education for social change. Now these people come into the picture, and do you want to comment on them just a little bit, because now they have a little bit different aim, don't they?
It's not different. They're working in collaboration. And so I don't remember the years. And Thomas, I don't know if you remember through our education as well through PCHC, but SECUS is actually the education arm of Planned Parenthood. Now, I say that, and it's like, okay, so they're a completely different 401(c)(3).
Yeah.
So they're not the same organization, but SECUS was created by the director of Planned Parenthood, Mary Calderon.
Right.
And she separated from Planned Parenthood not because she wanted to leave Planned Parenthood, but because Planned Parenthood is a clinic providing abortions and birth control and all of that. They thought, wouldn't it be great to have this education arm that all they do is focus on education? So SECUS was created by the director of Planned Parenthood, Mary Calderon, becoming the education arm. And then they said, well, we need a research arm. And so then you have the Guttmacher Institute. And they were
Okay.
all formed by people who were directors of Planned Parenthood. So really, they're all the same people. And so sex ed for social change, that's the new tagline for SECUS as of maybe 5 or 6 years. I don't know how long they've had that now. That social change is away from Christian values, away
Yes.
from a traditional marriage, away from a mother and a father staying together, staying married, having children, and protecting those children and teaching them to not have sex until they get married. So that's the social change that they're looking for, is that they want to change society away from traditional values, which are Judeo-Christian values, and create a new culture, a
A new
culture where no
utopia,
one
huh?
is married.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone is having, sexual freedom. It's all pleasure based. It's not about it's not about commitment. It's not about monogamy. It's not about family. It's not about loyalty. It's not about a covenant at all. It's not about a covenant.
Yeah, that was just so good, Monica. And that's what I meant by my remark there, that they come at a slightly different angle, where I picture, Planned Parenthood. I'm in the business of, you have sex and then I'm going to fix it afterwards, and that's how I make my money. Where I view SECUS a slightly different angle, they actually, and look, you're right, they're all in bed together with this kind of stuff. They all want to see this, but I see them more of, I'm going to throw out the term Marxists, but they
Mhm.
actually see everything that's normal about, like you said, traditional marriage, family, children. They just want to twist and distort that. And
Yeah.
so sex education and so what they do is they bring sex education in to change, like you said, the whole civilization, our whole culture, and then ultimately our country. And you know what, Monica, 10 years ago, if you and I were talking, people would say, "Ah, Jack, you're crazy. They're not going to try to change the whole country and the culture, are they?" And then what are we seeing today? I mean, we're seeing it,
Yeah.
this is like a train wreck, isn't it, you guys? Right in front of us, and it's happening right here.
Yeah.
And what we're
And
trying to do is just say, everybody, you got to wake up and see what's going on.
well, what I've always said is that, and I've been speaking out on this since 2009. So imagine when I first started coming out talking about this, probably the only sex educator that I know of that has talked about this, or former comprehensive sex educator that's come out and blown the whistle like this. No one, people don't want to listen. Parents don't want to listen. It was really just the pro-life
Yeah, yeah,
community.
that's
And the
right.
reason the pro-life community wanted to listen is because I helped them understand that sex education is the marketing tool that feeds abortion. So unless you have people who are having sex outside of marriage and becoming pregnant when they didn't want to be pregnant, well, now, if you don't have a large population of people doing that, then Planned Parenthood doesn't make money off abortion. So sex education, the reason when you look at their yearly budget, you'll see that sex education is number 2 as far as expenditures, how much money they put into sex education. And that really, you should read it as their marketing tool. So they are going out and teaching children and adults that this is the kind of sex you should be having. And it's not a matter of if you get a disease or get pregnant, but a matter of when. So then you must be referred to Planned Parenthood. And it becomes this cycle of, we teach you how to have sex outside of marriage. We teach you how to have high risk sex so that you are now dependent on our services. You get a disease, you have to come to Planned Parenthood. You get pregnant, you have to come to Planned Parenthood. So it's marketing tool, the sex education and the clinic, that really creates patients or clients for life. And it is killing our communities. It's killing individuals. It's obviously killing our preborn children. It's destroying family, and absolutely it's communist. Every one of these organizations, and some of your listeners may be thinking, how is that possible? Well,
Yeah.
you can just read the Communist Manifesto yourself, where it says that they want to get rid of not only private business and private property, but they also want to destroy the private family. They don't believe that children should truly belong to parents as God designed it. And they actually, in the, Marx and Engel actually say in the Communist Manifesto, the only way we can destroy the family and break it apart is to destroy their God. It literally says that we must get rid of their belief in a Judeo-Christian God. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's why they attack Christianity, and why God showed me when I first started speaking, what is the solution? He said, well, the problem, he showed me the reason they are destroying family and making sure that parents are not aware of what education their children are getting, or that they're getting services at a Planned Parenthood, is because they want to destroy the family. And why? Because God created the family, and it's one of the most powerful institutions in our humanity. And this is really a goal to destroy God's creation of humanity.
Yeah.
well, one of
That's a
in
great
Illinois,
point. Thank you for
it's
that.
been very effective. 3 years ago, Illinois adopted a bill, or passed a bill, to remove parental notification for abortion. So children, 13-year-old girls, can now go into a Planned Parenthood abortion clinic, or any abortion clinic, and get an abortion without any parental approval, 13 years old.
That's
And
right.
so that certainly effectively eliminates any parental control over those kids.
Well, this is why, as people of faith, we do have to be paying attention and involved in our government through voting and through policy work, because our laws are being created to destroy the very authority that God has given us as a family. So you mentioned that law, Thomas. Title 10 is one of the programs that I was trained to train on, and that's family planning, which is birth control, pap smears, things like that. And in that, the people who can get services paid for by the government for those services are women of childbearing age. That includes little girls. That
Now,
includes little girls.
is Title 10? I keep hearing about Title 9 so much, right? That's
Yeah.
always in the news. Title 9. So Title 10 is that something that's prominent today? Where are we at with that today? Is that
Title
just
10 is probably majority of the money that Planned Parenthood gets from the government. Absolutely. It's
so
family
let's
planning
unpack
money.
that a little bit. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
think this is very interesting for parents.
Right.
Parents don't realize, Monica, you were alluding to this. Trying to wake them up is one of the reasons Tom and I go out and present Stolen Innocence. We get a lot of grandparents, we get a lot of people that had a Christian background. Well, the millennials, don't have that Christian background, and
Right.
to try to wake them up is not easy. So let's talk about Title 10 a little bit, because what you just said, we try to work with parents in two tracks. One is to educate their children, which you speak on, right? That they're the primary educators, you said, of their children, right? So I want to just talk a little bit about that. The other track is we have to be involved in local school boards, library boards. We have to look for, people in political office that are going to hold these same values, and we've made that disconnection somehow between church and state, right? So, well, be careful when you do that, because look, at church and state aren't the same thing, but we have to take our Christian values into the world, don't we? Into the culture. If we become a politician, we need to bring these family values into office with us and be public about it, because if we don't, this is not going to end well, is it?
Absolutely. Well, for the parents out there, how does I'll answer how the government interferes with your children without you knowing about
Thank
it.
you. Yes.
And that is going to be through Title 10, and that's family planning money. And I'll describe each of these: the STD prevention money, HIV prevention money, any kind of sex education prevention money. All of those will provide your children with sex education, condoms, lubrication, testing, treatments, birth control, without your knowledge or your money. And it will all be paid for by the government, because each of those will reach out to anyone who is sexually active, regardless of age. In family planning, which is more about women getting pap smears, birth control, things like that, it will be to women of childbearing age. Like I said earlier, that's government language, women of childbearing age, which means a girl could be as young as 9, could go in there without her parents' knowledge, and they will provide her with an exam, testing, treatment, and birth control, all paid for by the government.
Could I interject just a question about that?
Mhm.
Can schools also contract with Planned Parenthood to come into the school and provide those kind of services to the students without the parents knowing?
It depends on the state. It depends on the state, how that's done. I know in Texas, there was policy that was put together that couldn't happen, like a Planned Parenthood or anyone associated with Planned Parenthood or abortion provider really was not allowed to do that. But that doesn't mean that they can't still contract with other clinics and organizations that do that.
Right,
So being very specific, I think it was a great policy to say that abortion providers could not provide those services at the school or education at the school. But there are other organizations that are not abortion providers who could do that too. So, they're, federally qualified health clinics receive Title 10. So they're going to see your children as well. If you were to go to the CDC website right now and look up adolescent confidentiality, they have basically passed, it's not a law, and the CDC is not elected, but they have great power of influence. And so they have said that adolescents deserve confidentiality to get sexual health care, which means that parents aren't going to be notified, that they will provide these services and education to children, to minors, without parental knowledge, all in the name of adolescent confidentiality. So there are lots of ways that our government is doing this, whether it's in public schools or in the public square.
So
Now,
Monica,
I have
tell,
seen,
for parents that are wondering, like, how will my, 9, 10, 11-year-old child be exposed to this, say, in a public school and or end up in one of these clinics? Can you talk just a little bit about
I'm
that? Because,
glad. Yep.
some people will say, well, that's not going to happen to my child,
I'm so glad I was just about to address that.
Thank
So
you.
what I'm seeing in the standards, the education standards of your education system in your state, go read the health standards. What I'm seeing, and I can't say that it's in every state, but I'm pretty sure it probably is something it's a standard that says how to navigate the healthcare system. Sounds very benign, sounds even positive, doesn't it? So basically, they're teaching our children in public schools how to navigate the healthcare system, which really means, where do I get STD testing? Where do I get HIV testing? Where is my family planning clinic that I can get to? What are my rights? Will my parents know about it? No, because you have adolescent confidentiality. And so they teach our children how to navigate that system. And that's another reason why there's a push to bring the school-based health clinics into the school, because these people are thinking, well, not all these kids are going to have the transportation, or their parents might even say, where are you going? So why not just provide it at the school instead? And then the parents are not realizing, because many parents like that there's a school-based health clinic, because they're like, great, now I don't have to leave work, because my child may, can get medicine at the school. If something happens, well, there's a doctor there. How wonderful is that? It all happens in the school. What they're not realizing is that they're giving up their parental authority, and major decisions are being made about their children without their being notified, without them being present. They have no idea what they're asking their children, or what they're telling their children, or what they're encouraging their children to do.
And I
And
don't
so it's
think
a very dangerous practice.
and I don't think most parents understand that the school counselors have been trained in all of this.
Every professional, I guess, job profession in the public school districts have all gone towards the left. So if you were to look up the National School Counselor Association,
Yes, good point.
you
Very
can
good
read
point.
their mission statement, their values, their standards, and you are going to see that they are affirming LGBTQ, transgender fluidity, the whole thing. You can look at the Association for Superintendents. You can look at the Association for any profession in the public school system, and they have all accepted and are affirming this new agenda for social change. I'll say that. It may not be that they're connected to SECUS, but they all have the same agenda to change the values, the beliefs, and behaviors of our children for social change away from our Judeo-Christian values in this country. And it's going across the globe, obviously.
It sounds almost hopeless.
Well, and so I know, Thomas,
Unless,
like,
well,
Monica,
unless we
where's the
get go,
hope?
unless we keep talking about this like we're doing here
Yeah.
today, and so parents will stand up. Look at we know some parents are hearing this loud and clear, but not all of them are they. It's a battle. We're in a spiritual battle, Monica, and I've heard you talk about this before. You alluded to it earlier. This goes all the way back to Genesis 3, doesn't it?
Yes,
You
it
can
does.
be like God. You can decide what's good and what's evil. We I just had a conversation with somebody in the church, and they said this is unprecedented time, and I asked them why, and they said because in the old times we'd be fighting some battle, right? Good and evil, but it would be one or two at a time. Now there's no truth. There's no truth. So it's moral. It's just a moral relativism. We secularized the culture, our own families, our own hearts, and unfortunately, many in the church even you can't find this truth. So what we're doing here today, we have to keep doing, don't we?
Absolutely. You know, when we're talking about what that parents need to be aware of, and I think Thomas mentioned, like, well, where's the hope, and this is so, it feels so hopeless. And I think we have to just kind of get to a point where it is time to fight for our children. These are our children. And we're going to answer to the Lord about how we cared for our children, very much
Yeah.
so. So we have a great investment in our kids, and I know that majority of parents out there, even though this left ideology that's highly sexualized, they love to believe that parents are abusive and harmful to children. I mean, they say that all the time. And you're going to see that at the schools, that parents are uneducated, they're ill-equipped, they don't know what they're doing, they're never going to speak, they're never going to protect, they're never going to do anything. So we, the experts, have to do it. That's exactly what sex educators believe. And that's exactly what I have heard from the professionals at our public school systems, is that parents aren't going to do it. We're going to have to do it for them. Parents aren't going to do it. And this is why they don't like opt-in. They don't want opt-in laws in schools, which means that they can't teach your child, for example, sex education unless you opt them in, unless you sign something that gives them permission to do it. They don't like it because they know parents aren't going to do it. They'd rather do an opt-out, that if the default is that they'll teach your children whatever they want to teach. And the only way that they won't teach it to them is if you sign a paper saying don't teach it. And so they're really hoping parents are disengaged. But if your child is in a public school, you cannot be disengaged. You have got to be like an investigator. If you're not willing to take out your child from that public school, then you probably need to be there as often as possible and know about every curriculum and every person that speaks and touches your child. And that's not being a helicopter parent, because what we're seeing and the stories that we're hearing from these public schools is that we've got counselors, we have third-party organizations like Communities in Schools who have case managers, and they are constantly bombarding our children with this very depraved ideology, from transgenderism to becoming gay, to believing that they're oppressed. I mean, the DEI stuff, it is a constant bombardment of their little minds. And again, the goal is to change their values, their beliefs, and their behaviors. This is how they will achieve social change. And our children are basically an experiment in the public school system.
Mm.
Now, people are going to hear this and they're going to say, I don't believe anything you just said. Well, then go read it for yourself.
They're not hiding
Go,
it, are they?
yeah,
Yeah.
they're
To
not
your
hiding
point,
it.
no.
It's
Tom, you
go
know
and
this
read it.
too.
Go and
Yep.
see it, because
Yep.
it's right there.
They're
They're
putting
saying
it right in front of our face, just like you
Mhm.
said. They mocked the Last Supper at the Olympics. That's right in your face. They told those athletes, don't bring any religious symbols here, and
Yeah.
then they mock it, right? Well, this is what's going on all over. Tom, I know you and I talked the other day about the Gleason clubs
Oh, yeah.
in schools,
Listen, right.
right? Broach that subject just a little bit.
Well, yeah, glisten is simply Trojan horse to recruit children into a sexualized lifestyle, into a gay sexualized lifestyle. That's happening. You can see this just from the statistics, where in my generation, 2% of the people identified as LGBT, and today in the kids in school, it's up to 26%. Well, I also know from research that I've done in Glisten that they encourage children to get into these clubs to experiment with sexuality and same sexuality, and they target kids who are vulnerable. But one of the things, and I'm sure that that's going on. I know that 20% of the adults in this country have been sexually abused sometime when they were a kid. Half of those people, half of them have been sexually exploited by an adult in the school system. So our schools are not safe for the kids. So the idea that these experts can protect our children better than the parents is simply wrong. It's provably wrong. It's provably wrong by the information that we've learned about GLSEN and these other gay straight alliance groups, and it's also by just the statistics on the number of kids who are being sexually exploited and abused. But the thing that concerns me the most is that the way you describe it, the way we've both seen, well, the way Jack and I have seen it, it feels like parents are surrounded and they don't have any bullets to fight their way out of it. What would you suggest that parents do? What would be the best thing, the next best thing for parents to do to try to protect their children?
Well, I mean, my first, I'll start with what I know is their strength. The very fact that God has created them to be the parents of their own children, they should have 100% confidence that they are fully equipped to educate and protect those children. God has put it in our children to want the love, the attention, and to be guided by their actual biological parents. It's just, I even saw when I worked with kids who were abused and were living in a shelter. And I was a house parent for kids who had been abused and lived at a shelter. And even those children, I could read their histories of what was done to them, whether it was neglect, whatever it was. They still wanted mom and dad. That desire to be loved and protected by their parents was bigger than anything that we could have done for them. They were just hoping mom and dad would change. And even if they didn't, they just still wanted to go home. They wanted the love of their parents. And that's something that God has put into every single one of us. Why do I bring that up? Because parents need to understand that they are absolutely powerful over their children. God has given them something so special that they can protect and educate those children themselves. And if you just need a little education, you can get a little education on that. If you just need a little support, you can get a little support. But do not default your children. Do not hand them over to an expert. You're their expert. And just
such
know,
good. Yeah, that's such
know
good
that you
advice.
can do it.
Yeah.
Know you can do it. Now, what about the public schools? I lean all the way to the point that because I know what's happening in the schools and I know how the government has set up these schools and how every professional in the school, their associations are encouraging to affirm LGBT and the DEI and all of it. It is an abusive environment. And why would I drop off my child in an abusive environment that is trying to change their values, their beliefs, and their behaviors away from me, the parent? Why would I do that? Now, I know the next thought is, well, Monica, what about those parents who just can't because they have to work? I get that. I was a single mom. I was in the time that my son was being raised. A lot of these things were not something that we even knew about. What would I have done as a single mom if I had, if my son was a minor today? I probably would go move in with my mother, mostly so that she could help take care of him and we could somehow homeschool him while I worked. Because I just can't imagine dropping off my child in an abusive environment. And so I really think that parents, if they want to consider taking their child out of school, I highly recommend that they can look at organizations like Public School Exit. That gives them a lot of education and resources on how they can exit the public school system and give their children a good education. I think there are quite a few, Heidi St. John talks quite a bit about homeschooling kids. There's a lot of churches that I have met that are now putting together schools within their own church so that the children and families can come to them to get a classical education free of all these ideologies. And so there are a lot of people, communities that are creating alternatives to public school. And I think that's just something that, be prayerful about, because I do believe that God will open the door to ensure that your child is safe, whether it's a co-op or a homeschool or a change in the way your family does their finances so one parent can stay at home. There's a lot of options. And I think that people need to be more prayerful and trust God in that, because it is not a safe environment for a child to be in public school today.
Thomas,
Yeah,
any
excellent.
we're gonna wind up because I have to be cognizant of your time. I mean, it's amazing how fast this time is going here. Public school exit is they can go to their website, can't they?
Yes.
Monica. And then how about tell us a little bit about your website and the work that you continue to do today.
Yeah. Well, my business is called It Takes a Family, and my website is ittakesafamily.org. I mostly do public speaking, and I am working on some resources for parents on how they can talk to their own children about God, just really their purpose in creation and their value. I always tell parents that, when you talk to your children about sex education, it is not really talking about the act of sex anymore. Parents think that that's what it is. But if we do that, then we're objectifying sex just like the secular world does. We need to really start in talking to our children about their identity, how God created them, what is marriage, what is a family, and so it's more about teaching about our humanity and our identity. And yes, at some point you do talk about biology and things like that. But if that's the only thing you talk about, then you have just objectified sex, just like the world has. So God has taught us to do it differently. And so I really enjoy helping parents understand that.
Because you're a powerful speaker. When I've seen you, my heart, it does something to my heart. It's just good.
Yeah.
It's good. You're speaking the truth. People can tell. When you speak with conviction like that with parents, I think you really create confidence in parents, because you're exactly right. The human heart was made for that family unit, and for when I speak to high school kids, people, parents don't think that they have a big effect, right? They're arguing with their kids and everything. First of all, there is a wedge being driven. You've made that very clear. There's a wedge being purposely driven between kids and their parents. But still, despite that, when I talk to kids, and especially after we give a presentation and we break them down to small group discussions, they'll say, "Well, Dad said this, and Mom said this, and my dad told me about this." And you're exactly right. And a lot of it's modeling. A lot of it's how, if you want to impress your kids, show affection and respect to their mother, right?
Mhm.
And I know for my wife, if I want her to get on the good side of her, I show respect and love to my children, and then to their children, our grandchildren. It's amazing beauty on all that, how that all works. Tom, any last question or comment?
No, I thank you very much. It's really been a pleasure talking to you, and I support your activities and hope you flourish and get a lot of help parents know what they should be doing.
Oh, thank you, both of you. That's a great encouragement for me. And pray for It Takes a Family, because we know that
Yes.
this, I'll be praying for you all as well, because
Yes.
this is
Thank you.
obviously work that God wants to bless. And of course, the enemy wants to destroy, just like he wants to destroy the family. So I appreciate you guys and what you're doing. And
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.